The storm hit Oak Haven County like it wanted to wash the world away. Rain slammed into the earth, turning fields into mud and roads into rivers. Thunder rolled so hard it shook the old farmhouse at the edge of the county. Arthur Vance was sitting by his wood stove when he heard the sound that changed everything. It was not thunder. It was not wind. It was a weak, broken wheeze, followed by a dull metal clank at his front gate. Arthur had lived alone for 5 years. Since his wife Martha passed, the house had been quiet. No visitors, no horses, no business. He had sold his stock, closed his training barn, and shut the door on a life that once meant everything to him. Horses had brought him joy, money, and heartbreak. When Martha died, he gave them up. He thought he was done. At 2 in the morning, the motion light at the end of his long driveway flickered on. Arthur ignored it at first. Deer passed through all the time. Coyotes, too. But then the sound came again. A heavy, wet thud against wood. Slow. Desperate. Arthur pulled on his raincoat and grabbed a flashlight. The wind hit him hard as he stepped onto the porch. Rain soaked his boots in seconds. He pointed the beam down the driveway toward the iron gate by the road. What he saw made his breath stop. A horse stood in the mud. It barely looked alive. Its head hung low, almost touching the ground. Rain ran down a coat so thin and filthy that every rib showed clear as fence rails. Hip bones stuck out sharp and cruel. The animal shook so hard the gate rattled each time it leaned forward. Arthur walked closer, his boots sinking deep into the muck. The smell hit him next. Rot. Infection. Long neglect. This was not a horse that wandered off by mistake. This was a horse that had been left to die. The animal did not try to run. It did not have the strength. It lifted its head just enough for Arthur to see its eyes. Dull, sunken, tired in a way Arthur knew too well. "Easy," Arthur said softly, though the wind carried his words away. He unlatched the gate. The horse took one step forward and nearly collapsed. Arthur caught its weight against his shoulder, grunting as his feet slid in the mud. "I got you," he said. "You're not dying tonight." It took nearly an hour to move the horse to the barn. Arthur stopped every few steps to let it breathe. Once inside the dry stall, his old instincts took over. He did not give grain. He made warm mash. Small handfuls. Slow care. He dried the horse with old towels and rubbed life back into frozen legs. As he cleaned the mud from the horse's neck, his hand hit something hard. A leather halter, grown tight into the skin. Arthur cut it off at once and carried it to the sink. Under the dirt, brass showed through. There was a nameplate. The name had been scratched, but not enough. Valky's Pride. Arthur froze. That name was known across 3 states. A champion thoroughbred. A legend. Owned by the richest family in Kentucky. Reported dead in a stable fire 2 years ago. A fire that paid out millions in insurance. Arthur walked back to the stall with shaking hands. He lifted the horse's lip. There it was. The tattoo. Faded but real. This was no stray. This was a ghost. And if this horse was alive, someone powerful had lied. Someone powerful had committed a crime, and Arthur had just taken the evidence into his barn. For weeks, Arthur barely slept. He lived in the barn. The horse was weak. Refeeding was dangerous. Infection set in. Arthur called the only person he trusted, Dr. Sarah Bennett. She had trained under him years ago. When she saw the horse, she covered her mouth. "This is cruelty," she said. "We should call the sheriff." "No," Arthur said. "Not yet." He showed her the nameplate. "The tattoo." Sarah went pale. "They said he burned," she whispered. "They buried an empty box," Arthur said. "Or another horse." They treated the stallion in secret. Medicine brought at night. Windows boarded. Weeks passed, then months. Slowly, the horse changed. Muscle returned. The dull coat fell away to reveal deep, dark shine. When Arthur turned him out behind the trees, the horse did not just move. He floated. Arthur named him Bones. But secrets do not stay buried in small towns. One afternoon in town, Arthur heard a voice that made his stomach drop. A man saying he saw a bay horse near the Vance property, a man who once worked for the Sterling estate. That evening, a black SUV sat at the top of Arthur's driveway. A young man leaned against the hood. Well-dressed, cold smile. Connor Sterling. Arthur knew then this was not about land. This was about finishing what they started. "You have 24 hours, Connor said softly. Make the right choice." As the SUV drove away, Arthur ran to the barn. Bones stood calm, chewing hay. "They're coming for you," Arthur whispered. Arthur looked into the horse's eyes and made a choice that would put everything on the line. Running would not save them. Only the truth would. The night after Connor Sterling's visit felt colder than any winter Arthur could remember. He stood in the barn doorway, watching Bones breathe in the soft glow of the lantern. The world outside was full of danger, but inside the barn the air felt warm and alive. It was the only safe place left. Arthur kept replaying Connor's words. 24 hours. A warning. A threat. A countdown. He knew the Sterling family well enough to understand they were not bluffing. If they came back, they would not ask questions. They would take the horse and bury the truth forever. Arthur dialed Sarah with shaking hands. "They know," he said. "We have to move him tonight." But when he grabbed the old travel halter, he froze. Running would only make them look guilty. The Sterling family had money, power, and the sheriff on their side. The moment Arthur hit the road, they would find him. Bones would disappear. Arthur would be framed. The truth would die, again. Then an idea struck him. It was wild, dangerous, almost impossible, but it was the only chance they had. Arthur stepped toward Bones, who lifted his head as if he already understood the weight of the moment. "We're not hiding," Arthur said. "We're going straight into the light." The Kentucky Cup was only 3 days away, a televised event watched across the state. Every horse entered had its tattoo checked by race officials. If Bones walked into that paddock, under those lights, the truth couldn't be destroyed. Not in front of the world. He didn't need Bones to win. He just needed him to be seen. But Arthur had no trailer, no entry fee, and no jockey. And Bones hadn't raced in years. There was only one man Arthur could call. A man whose life had fallen apart almost as badly as Bones's body had. Leo Russo. Once the most talented jockey in Kentucky, Leo had talent as sharp as a blade and a temper just as dangerous. One mistake after another pushed him out of the spotlight until he disappeared into the darkest corner of the racing world. Rumors said he slept behind a tack shop. Some said he drank more than he ate. Arthur found Leo sitting behind the shop on an old crate, staring into a cup of coffee that smelled like whiskey. "Arthur Vance," Leo said, rubbing his eyes, "I thought you swore off horses." "I need a rider," Arthur said. Leo laughed hard enough to cough. "For who?" "The ghosts you talked to in that empty barn?" Arthur took a slow breath. "I have Valky's pride." Leo's entire body went still. "That's not funny," he whispered. "That horse burned. We all saw the smoke." "Come see him." An hour later, Leo stood in Arthur's barn, staring at Bones. The stallion lifted his head, stepped forward, and pressed his muzzle into Leo's chest. It was gentle. It was trusting. It was a spark between two souls who had been thrown away. Leo's voice cracked. "He's alive!" "He needs to start one race," Arthur said. "Not win, just start. Once the officials check his tattoo, the world will know." Leo looked at the horse again. "If we do this, Sterling will kill us." Arthur nodded. "He's already trying." Leo set down his cup. For the first time in years, his hands stopped shaking. "I'll ride him." They now had a rider, but they still had a problem. The sheriff was watching every road out of Oak Haven. If Arthur pulled out a trailer, he'd be stopped within minutes. So Arthur created a plan built on trickery and hope. At 11 that night, Sarah drove an empty horse trailer out of Arthur's driveway. Within 2 miles, blue lights flashed behind her. The sheriff ripped open the trailer door and found nothing. While the law was busy yelling at Sarah, a rusty furniture truck rolled quietly out the back road of Arthur's farm. Inside the dark box, surrounded by hay and old mattresses, Arthur held Bones steady as Leo drove toward Lexington. The trip took 4 hours. Every bump made Arthur grip the horse tighter. He whispered to him for most of the ride, "Just hold on, boy, we're almost there." They reached the track before dawn. A guard named Pappy, an old friend who owed Arthur a favor, waved the truck through without checking the back. They walked Bones into a quiet quarantine barn, far from the crowds. When Bones stepped out of the truck, he lifted his head high. His ears flicked toward the sound of distant hooves. He could smell the dirt. He could feel the energy. The track woke something inside him. While the sky slowly brightened, Arthur brushed Bones until he shimmered like polished copper. The horse stood tall, strong. Everything he once was, reborn. Arthur didn't have fancy silks. He used an old black set he found in his attic. Simple, bold, the color of shadows and truth. Then came the moment he had been dreading. The entry fee. It was more than Arthur had seen in years. He walked into the registration office with a folded envelope, his entire life savings. The clerk looked at the name Arthur wrote on the form. Horse name, the Ghost. It was safer than Valky's Pride. It would buy them time. "You're in the 9th race," the clerk said. "Odds are 99 to 1. Arthur gave a tired smile. "I like those odds." By the time the sun rose fully, the track was alive. Crowds gathered. Cameras flashed. But Arthur's eyes went straight to the VIP box. Richard Sterling, standing tall, confident, ready to celebrate another victory. He had no idea that the horse he tried to erase was only a few barns away, alive, strong, and ready to step into the light. Everything was set. Arthur checked the girth one last time. Leo settled into the saddle. Bones pawed the dirt, ready to move. Then Arthur heard a sound that froze his blood. A shout. A commotion. And the voice of a man he feared more than any other. Connor Sterling. He was pushing through the crowd. And he had found them. Connor Sterling stormed into the paddock like a man who had just seen a ghost. His eyes locked on the horse Arthur was leading, and his face drained of all color. He pushed past handlers and spectators until he stood only a few feet away from Bones. "That's him," Connor said, pointing with a shaking finger. "Get that horse out of here right now." The crowd turned. People whispered. Reporters raised their cameras. Arthur felt his stomach twist, but he lifted his shoulders and stood between Connor and Bones. "He's entered in the 9th race," Arthur said. "Fees are paid." Papers signed. Connor's voice cracked with panic. "That horse belongs to the Sterling family. He was stolen." Arthur stepped forward. "You said he died in a fire. You collected $4 million for him, so how can I steal a dead horse?" A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Phones came up. People started recording. The noise drew even more attention. And then Richard Sterling himself arrived, red-faced and trembling with anger. "Sheriff!" Richard shouted. "Arrest this man. That horse is a fraud." Arthur raised his voice so everyone could hear him. "Check the tattoo." Quote. Silence fell over the paddock. Even the horses seemed still. A racing steward named Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He looked at Richard, then at Arthur, and then at the trembling stallion beside them. Slowly, he lifted Bones's upper lip and looked at the faded green numbers inside. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched. "J 5422, he said. "Confirmed. This horse is Valky's Pride." The paddock erupted. Reporters shoved their microphones through the rail. Fans shouted, cameras flashed, people gasped and cheered. It felt like the whole world had cracked open at once. Richard Sterling staggered backward. He knew the truth was out. And the police officer standing nearby knew it too. Insurance fraud at that level meant federal charges. The game was over. Arthur didn't watch the chaos. He focused on Bones, who stood calm and steady, looking almost proud. "Race him!" Arthur shouted up to Leo. "They can't stop it now." The bugle sounded through the stadium. Horses were called to the track. The crowd was buzzing. The story was spreading through the stands faster than wildfire. A dead champion had returned. People wanted to see him run. Bones marched onto the dirt with Leo on his back, wearing the plain black silks. The track lights made the stallion's coat shine like dark fire. Even from the rail, Arthur could see the energy rolling off him. This was where he belonged. When the horses loaded into the starting gates, the stadium went quiet. Arthur's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He gripped the rail, eyes fixed on the far outside post where Bones stood. The bell rang. The gates flew open. Bones stumbled out late. He was instantly 3 lengths behind. The crowd groaned. They thought the magic had ended as soon as it began. But Arthur didn't move. He knew something the others didn't. Bones wasn't running on practice. He was running on survival. Leo didn't push him at first. He let the horse find his breath, find the rhythm he had once known so well. Dust rose behind the pack as they thundered down the backstretch. Then, at the far turn, Bones made a sound Arthur had only heard once before, a sharp snort filled with power. His stride stretched long and smooth, his ears pinned back. His muscles rolled like waves beneath his coat. "He remembers," Arthur whispered. The announcer screamed into the microphone. "The ghost is making a move! Valky's pride is charging through the field." Bones passed one horse, then another, then 3 more. The crowd stood on their feet as the stallion swallowed the track with each stride. At the top of the stretch, he was in 3rd. The leader was 2 lengths ahead. Leo leaned forward and yelled one word, "Now!" Bones exploded. He surged forward like he had never been weak a day in his life. The crowd roared. People threw their hats. Cameras zoomed. Arthur felt tears spill down his face as Bones pulled even with the leader. They thundered neck and neck toward the wire. The finish flashed past. Photo finish. Arthur held his breath. He leaned on the rail, shaking. Leo sat frozen in the saddle. Bones stood tall, sides heaving, eyes bright. The board lit up. First place, the ghost. Bones had won. The stadium erupted in cheers so loud the ground shook. Arthur ran onto the track and reached the horse. He wrapped his arms around Bones's neck, burying his face into the warm coat. "You did it," Arthur whispered. "You came back." As Leo slid off, he wiped tears from his eyes. He wasn't ready, he said. But he ran like he knew this was his fight. Police walked Richard and Connor Sterling past the winner's circle in handcuffs. The crowd booed them. Cameras followed their every step. Their empire of lies had crumbled in one morning. But Arthur didn't spare them a glance. He was too busy holding the horse that had fought through starvation, cruelty, and death itself to stand in the light again. Weeks later, Oak Haven County felt different. The barn was warm again. Arthur wasn't alone anymore. Sarah visited often. Leo rebuilt his life. And Bones grazed in a green pasture, fat and healthy, the sun shining off his coat like new copper. People said you couldn't outrun your past. Arthur had learned something else. Sometimes you had to face it head on, with a wounded horse at your side, and race straight into your future. Bones didn't just win a race. He won his life back. And he gave Arthur his back too.